Hi Arjun, how's your IELTS preparation going?
Hi, Miss Anita. It's going okay, but I'm still a bit nervous about the speaking test. I feel like I can express myself, but I tend to lose track of what I'm saying. Can you help me improve my speaking and score higher?
Of course, Arjun. Let's go over some important strategies. The speaking test evaluates your fluency and coherence, vocabulary, grammar, and pronunciation. If you focus on improving these four areas, you'll definitely boost your score. Let's start with fluency and coherence. Do you feel you can speak continuously without long pauses?
Not really. I pause a lot when I can't think of the right word. It breaks my flow, and I start feeling self-conscious.
That's common, but with practice, you can overcome it. The key to fluency is speaking naturally and linking your ideas smoothly. Don't worry too much about using fancy words, just try to keep the conversation going. If you pause, take a moment to think of how you can connect your ideas instead of searching for the perfect word. For example, if you're talking about your favorite hobby, you could say something like, "One of my favorite hobbies is painting because it helps me relax. I started painting when I was younger, and now it's something I do in my free time." Notice how the ideas link naturally.
That makes sense. So instead of pausing, I should keep talking and explain my ideas more clearly?
Exactly. And don't forget to use fillers when necessary, like, "Let me think for a moment," or, "Well, that's an interesting question." It buys you a little time without breaking the flow. Also, practice thinking in English instead of translating from your native language. That will help you speak more smoothly.
I've been trying to think in English, but it's a bit challenging when the topic is unfamiliar.
I understand. That's why it's important to practice speaking about different topics. For part 1 of the speaking test, the topics are usually simple and personal, like hobbies, family, or your daily routine. But for part 2 and 3, you might get more abstract topics like technology or social issues, so it's good to prepare for a range of subjects. Start by talking to yourself about everyday topics, and as you get more comfortable, expand to broader themes.
I see. And how should I improve my vocabulary for these topics? I feel like I always use the same words.
Good question. Expanding your vocabulary is essential for a high score. Try learning synonyms for common words and practice using them in context. For example, instead of saying "I like," you can say "I'm fond of" or "I'm passionate about." It's also helpful to use collocations, common word pairings, like "take a break" or "make an effort." Another tip is to use phrasal verbs. They're often more natural in conversational English. For instance, instead of saying, "I stop working at 6 p.m., you could say, "I finish up work at 6 p.m. It sounds more fluent and less formal.
I've been trying to use phrasal verbs, but I'm not always sure if I'm using them correctly.
That's understandable. The best way to master phrasal verbs is through practice. Try to read and listen to native English content, like podcasts or articles, and pay attention to how these verbs are used in context. It will help you get a feel for them. Don't overthink it during the test, though. It's better to speak naturally than force a phrasal verb in the wrong context.
Got it. What about grammar? I tend to make a lot of mistakes with tenses.
That's another important point. In IELTS Speaking, the examiner will notice if you're using a variety of grammatical structures. Instead of always using simple sentences, try to mix in some complex ones. For example, instead of saying, "I like reading books, it helps me relax," you could say, "I like reading books because it helps me relax after a long day." It's a small change, but it shows a higher level of grammar. And don't worry too much about small mistakes. If you make one, it's okay to correct yourself, but don't let it affect your fluency. The examiner will appreciate that you're focusing on communication rather than perfection.
Okay, so it's more about variety than being perfect?
Exactly. The examiner wants to see that you can use different sentence structures and tenses effectively. If you can demonstrate that, even with a few small mistakes, you'll score well. Let's move on to pronunciation. Do you think your pronunciation is clear?
I think my pronunciation is okay, but I have an accent. I'm worried that it might lower my score.
Don't worry about your accent, Arjun. Everyone has an accent, and the IELTS test doesn't penalize you for that. What's important is clarity. Make sure your words are understandable and focus on stress and intonation. For example, when asking a question, your voice should rise slightly at the end, like, Do you enjoy traveling? This adds a natural rhythm to your speech.
I'll work on my intonation. I've noticed that native speakers tend to use a lot of expression when they speak.
Exactly. Intonation and stress can make your speech sound more natural and engaging. A good way to practice is by listening to native speakers, whether through podcasts, movies, or interviews, and mimicking their tone. This will not only help your pronunciation, but also your overall fluency.
That's helpful. How should I handle the cue card in part 2? I tend to run out of things to say after 1 minute.
The key to the cue card is preparation. You'll have 1 minute to prepare, so use it wisely. Write down a few bullet points that will guide you through your answer. For example, if the topic is, describe a person you admire, your notes could include introduction, who the person is, why you admire them, a memorable example of their qualities, how they've influenced you. This structure helps you stay organized and cover all the points. Remember to speak for the full 2 minutes. If you run out of things to say, elaborate on your points by adding personal experiences or reflecting on the topic. For instance, you could say, I admire my teacher not only for her knowledge, but also for her ability to inspire students. I remember once when she encouraged me to. That way, you keep the conversation flowing.
That makes sense. So, I should prepare a structure in advance and expand on my ideas if I run out of content?
Exactly. And for part 3, remember that the questions will be more abstract. The examiner might ask your opinion on global or societal issues. Here, you'll need to give longer answers with examples. For instance, if the topic is about environmental issues, you could say, in my opinion, governments should take stricter actions to reduce pollution. For example, implementing policies to reduce plastic waste would make a big difference in protecting our environment. Always give reasons and examples to support your views.
I see. That will help me expand my answers more effectively. I feel more confident now about handling the different parts of the test.
You're doing great, Arjun. Keep practicing these strategies and don't hesitate to ask if you need more help. The key is to stay calm, focus on your strengths, and communicate clearly.
Thanks, Miss Anita. I'll keep working on my fluency, vocabulary, and grammar, and I'll definitely practice speaking more confidently. I feel a lot more prepared now.
You're welcome. Keep practicing, and I'm sure you'll do fantastic on your test. Good luck.